There are two names that affect who we are, what we are, how we live our lives. And Romans chapter 5 calls them the two Adams. The first Adam and the second Adam, and compares the impact of both and the motives of both. Just look at Romans chapter 5 verse 12. Therefore, just as sin entered the world through one man, and death through sin, and in this way death came to all people because all sinned. To be sure, sin was in the world before the law was given. But sin is not charged against to anyone's account where there is no law. Nevertheless, death reigned from the time of Adam to the time of Moses, even over those who did not sin by breaking a command, as did Adam, who is a pattern of the one to come. Verse 15. But the gift is not like the trespass. For if the many died by the trespass of the one man, how much more did God's grace and the gift that came by the grace of the one man, Jesus Christ, overflow to the many? Nor can the gift of God be compared with the result of one man's sin. The judgment followed one sin and brought condemnation, but the gift followed many trespasses and brought justification. For if by the trespass of the one man death reigned through that one man, how much more will those who receive God's abundant provision of grace and of the gift of righteousness reign in life through the one man, Jesus Christ? Consequently, just as one trespass resulted in condemnation for all people, so also one righteous act resulted in justification and life for all people. For just as through the disobedience of the one man the many were made sinners, so also through the obedience of the one man the many will be made righteous. What an analysis and comparison of the two Adams. I think the first thing you need to understand is that here, these are not mythological. The real Adam is described as somebody who physically lived on earth. And we are even given his story in Genesis. And the book of the New Testament is repeating it as history. Similarly, the birth of Jesus Christ, the second Adam, is a historical fact. It's not a myth. It's something you can verify. The only question is, what is the impact of the two Adams? Just look at verse 12. Therefore, just as sin entered the world through one man, and death through sin, and in this way death came to all people because all sinned, is what we are learning. And he is saying, which is very important for us to understand, sin came through Adam. If Adam did not give in to the devil originally, sin was not in the Garden of Eden at all. Of course, the first fall was the fall of the devil, who then cheated the woman, who asked the Adam to participate. Now, it's very important to understand in this scenario, if Adam and Eve did not sin at all, it will be important to see that there would have been no sin in the world. There's no way would have been the line of sin. Sin came through Adam. The interesting thing is, Eve was actually the one who was deceived first. But because the instructions had been given to Adam, the husband, he was held accountable for the sin of both. And it's very important to understand, we therefore don't talk about the sin of Eve. We talk about the sin of Adam. Because he knew what God had said. Yet when the wife consulted him, he agreed with her. So it is very important to understand and take responsibility for our errors. And if you are made a leader, you have to take more responsibility. But all of us have to take responsibility for the revelation God has actually given us, because that will be something that comes out here. So we are learning in verse 12 sin entered through Adam. Because of that sin, just like Adam had been told originally, he brought death. Nobody was dying in the garden. It was not possible to die. Death was not the vocabulary. But bringing sin, the penalty of sin, or the wages of sin, is death. So therefore, there could never have been any death if it were not for the sin of Adam. So, the falling to the temptation of Adam into sin brought sin to all of us. And sinning of Adam brought death to all of us. You can see the impact of this one man, Adam. All of us died then, all because we inherited Adam's sin, Adam's nature. And we need to understand that God did not create us to die. We took the decision with Adam to actually do what would bring us death. And I think that's an important thing. Just look at verse 13 and 14. To be sure, sin was in the world before the law was given. But sin is not charged against anyone's account where there is no law. Nevertheless, death reigned from the time of Adam to the time of Moses. Moses is the time of the law. He's the one who was given the law. But death was still reigning even before the law came. Even over those who did not sin by breaking a command, as did Adam, for who is a pattern of the one to come. And I think that's something that we need to be clear about. All men sinned in Adam's sinning. In other words, the product that comes from the nature of Adam has participated in the sin. So that's what we are learning even before the law was given to Moses. So therefore you break the law, we say you are a lawbreaker. Even before you are a lawbreaker, you had the nature of sin in Adam. So people died even before the law came. So the death was not brought by the law. Sin was not brought by the law. It just made it clear that what we are always doing was sinning. What does that really mean? We are born sinners. Even babies are sinners. They don't have to be given a training or a lecture on how to sin. They just start sinning. And in my current level, my current stage in life, I am seeing it again now, playing around with my grandchildren, and just seeing how a child can even design how to do something sinister and blames the sister or blame the brother or whatever. And I wonder, at this age, where did they get this thing? When you are below 5 years, where have you learned it? They don't have to learn it. We are born with the nature of sin. That means if you don't have the second Adam helping you, there's no hope. Our nature, this is a problem of our nature. It's like even a black man. Somebody says that's being black is sin. If it was sin, then you have no hope because it's in your nature to be black. What that means is that even if you get very educated and you have a PhD in psychology, all you can do to sinners is make them adjusted sinner, cleverer sinners, because now you have helped them in their psychology. They understand themselves. They understand what to do and what not to do. They affect their behavior, how their behavior is affecting others. So psychologists do not produce righteous people. They produce adjusted sinners. What about doctors? When the doctor comes to the scene to help us, the best he can do is produce healthy sinners, which means now they can sin with more strength because they are now healthy. What about if you are to bring an economist? If you bring an economist and he works on sinners, all you produce are affluent sinners. They are now rich. They have no poverty. That's what he does. What about if you bring a religious man to help these people? When a religious man comes to help them, they become religious sinners. But they're still sinners. What about if you are to call a pastor? Most likely, unless Christ helps, he will produce a wet sinner, because you baptize them. They will become wet sinners, from dry sinners to wet sinners, because they are now baptized. I think what Paul wants us to understand is that we are born sinners. Sin is inborn. The solution to our sin problem is simply becoming a new creation. Christ bring a new person out of us. That's why we call it being born again. We were born sinners. We are born again now with a desire to do righteousness. That's what we are. That's what we are. That's what we are learning. To be sure, sin was in the world before the law. It's in our nature. So we shouldn't blame. Death reigned from the time of Adam to the time of Moses, because even before the law it's in our nature. And even those who did not sin by breaking any command, because they didn't even know any command, it was in the pattern. It was in our nature. The difference is, before the law, sin, it was not charged against anyone's account, because if you haven't been told what not to do, when you don't fail, you don't say you have broken the law, because you didn't even know the law. And I think that's something that we need to understand, how serious our problem is. So, when we are now comparing the first Adam and the second Adam, or Adam versus Christ, there's a bit of similarity. Each of them is making an impact beyond himself. One man, either of the two men, affects many. Once you are Adam, all other people get your nature and they become sinners. If you are a Christ, you come in grace, and those who accept your grace are forgiven and satisfied. Through one person, Adam, you bring death. Through Christ, you access God's grace. And I think that's something very important. Just look at verse 15. But the gift is not like the trespass. For if the many died by the trespass of the one man, how much more did God's grace and the gift that came by the grace of the one man, Jesus Christ, overflow to the many? Similar. They overflow to the many. So, can you see? The motive behind each of them is different. The motive of the action of either. But also the motive that brought the person into being. Why do you think Adam sinned? Clearly, he was told, hey, if you eat this fruit, you'll be wise. If you use this fruit, it's good. Can't you see how good it is? He was not doing it with the God in view. He just became selfish. And so, the motivation for the first Adam was self-assertion. It was selfish will. Benefit. And that's what he brings to us. That motive of always wanting self-preservation, not worrying about others first. You think about yourself. What about the second? What about Christ? Right from the beginning, he wasn't coming to gain anything. He had everything as God. He was not coming to gain anything. Whereas the first Adam is selfish in motivation, the second one is self-sacrificing. He comes for the sake of others, for the sake of humankind. And then number two, he comes in obedience to his father. He wanted to do his father's will, not his will. Unlike the first Adam. And you need to ask yourself, do you see the difference? Where do you fit in? Do you live for self or do you live for God? Because Jesus Christ wanted to do the will of the Father. his motivation was to suffer as required by the Father for the sake of rescuing mankind. What about Adam? Nothing to do with it. He wasn't thinking about the people who will follow or not. It was, what am I going to gain out of it? And of course, that's where the temptation the devil gave him. Look at verse 16 and 17. Verse 16 is saying, nor can the gift of God be compared with the result of one man's sin. The judgment followed one sin and brought condemnation. But the gift followed many trespasses and brought justification. So we have seen the motive of the two Adams are different. What about the impact of their actions? You know, the first Adam, by his action, he brought condemnation to himself and all that get his nature. And of course, he brought in the reign of death. All must die. All appear on the scene for a short while and disappear. So death is now a constant thing in the life of people who get the nature of Adam. That's the impact. What about the second Adam, Jesus Christ? By his coming, verse 16 is telling us, we become justified. We reign with him over death. That the moment you get the new nature. He says those who believe in him will never die. So the death you get is just a relocation, which the late Billy Graham told people before he died. He said, one of these days they will announce to you that I'm dead. Don't believe them. I'll be as much alive as before. The only difference is I've changed my location. Translocation, not really death. When you become a Christian, death is no longer something to frighten you or to be afraid of. That's the new nature and the new hope he actually gives you. You are justified, all your sins are forgiven, and then you have reign over death. You now look to life eternal. Isn't that what he's saying in verse 17? For if by the trespass of one man, who is Adam, death reigned through the one man, how much more will those who receive God's abundant provision of grace? That's what you get, the consequence of trusting in God. It's the message repeated in the book of Romans. Just change your trust from trusting your ancestral spirits, or from trusting your religious leaders, or trusting even yourself. Stop trusting yourself. Start trusting in the second Adam, Jesus Christ. What will happen? You now operate under God's favor, grace. It is true you have failed his commandments, but because you subject yourself to the grace of God, you now enjoy his forgiveness. You get the gift of righteousness. So you now go into days when righteousness reigns in you, because it's imputed righteousness, not your nature. All that comes from the one man, Jesus Christ. And it will be important that you understand what that means. And you need to ask yourself very clearly, do you see the difference of the two Adam? Put it differently. Do you see the difference between the nature before you become a Christian to the nature you become a Christian? Do you see the kind of difference you're supposed to have? You no longer now suffer with the consequences of the first Adam, if you actually accept the second Adam, Jesus Christ, to not only live in your life, but to live through you, so that you can say with Paul, it's no longer I that lives, but Christ who lives through me. So it's no longer, I don't do things the way I want. I now allow Christ to live through me. Means I don't do what pleases me, I do what pleases God. I'm no longer egocentric, I become Christocentric. I see things from the eyes of the Lord Jesus Christ. And that gives me hope for this life and life beyond the grave. That's what it means if you have really become a Christian. So the two Adams are different in terms of their motive for their actions. One is aiming at what is in it for me. The other one is how can be useful to this mankind. So even you have to ask yourself, which of the two Adam is controlling your life? If you're always thinking about self, me, us, ours, and you never think about how does this honor God? Was I created just to serve my wife and my children? Or has God given more in me so that I live my life, not just for me and us, but in order to make an impact for others? Because if you have the nature of Christ, you not only enjoy this grace and this peace, you think about how others can enjoy it. If you only think about self, it means you're operating under the first Adam. If you are thinking about others also, it means the new nature, the nature of Christ, has become part and parcel of you, and it makes you other-centered rather than self-centered. That's really what we are learning. So in motive, your motives will be different. Why you do things will be different. The reason you do things will be different. The old one used to be self-centered. Us, you, ours, mine. The new one, you think about how can I honor God? How can God use me to impact others? And also in impact, you are different. Your life will never leave a legacy because your life will live for others. When you die, the kind of people you have impacted, whether many or few, will feel your absence. Because you're not just living for self. It's not just the inheritance you leave for your children. People who are not part of your family would have also benefited through your life. And they'll feel the loss beyond your wife and your children. Or beyond your spouse and your children. They'll feel the loss because you are living larger than just for the immediate. Because like Christ, your life is lived for others. You are other-centered. What about verse 18 and 19 of Romans chapter 5? It says, consequently, just as one trespass resulted in condemnation for all people, so also one righteous act resulted in justification and life for all people. Can you imagine? So you can see, one trespass, one decision to please self by Adam meant we are condemned. Our fellowship with God is gone. Remember, they used to have a fellowship in the cool of the evening. God would come visiting Adam and Eve. But as soon as sin came, their fellowship was broken. We needed now Christ to come and bring reconciliation. So through one man, we were now condemned. But through the death of Jesus, one righteous act by Jesus resulted in the forgiveness, justification of all who ever put their trust in this Christ. And in the process, we have life. All of us, every one of us, who chooses to put our trust in God. And I think that's something that we need to have clear in mind. Then verse 19 is saying, for just as through the disobedience of the one man, because that's what he did. He disobeyed God. He had been told clearly by God why not to take, what tree to take and which one not to take. Just as through the disobedience of the one man, the many were made sinners. We then, from then onwards, have the nature of sin. So also, through the obedience, because Christ obeyed his Father, through the obedience of the one man, Christ, the many will be made righteous. That's now the new nature. You accept Christ, and his righteous blood is the penalty for all you have ever done wrong. And now gives you the grace to operate. So, what are we saying? Death is not due to breaking of the law of Moses. I think it's important to understand is the nature we got when Adam decided not to live a life that honor God. And it will be important to understand then, even before Moses' law, people are still dying because the nature Adam gave us is the nature to sin. So when the law came, the law could not help, because the law was just pointing out to us to understand that we are condemned. It required the coming of Jesus. So, to stop those who are born sinners continuing to their death, that's really what we are talking about. And you can see the emphasis. Our nature is our problem. None of us is born with the capacity to do right. All have sinned and come to the glory of God, is what Paul told us in Romans chapter 3. So, what are we then saying? Only those who trust the righteous Adam, the work of Christ, by paying the penalty for our sin, only those who trust in him, who put their trust in him, will gain righteousness. Because we are children of God, the moment we do that, we put our trust in God. You know, Christ came and helped us both with the past and the future. With the past, our evil past is covered by Christ's death. So, he sorts out our past completely. We no longer have a problem with the past, or the guilt, all the evils. Your grandfather may have been a witch doctor. Your father may have been a murderer. That's all in the past. When you come to Christ, that's why he said it's like he has moved us from death to life. By the one act on the cross, he covers our past. Don't worry the kind of heritage and the kind of evil past you have had. Demonic activities in your past. But all of that is sorted out at the cross of Jesus. But even more important, the coming of Christ also handles the future. Christ has covered the future, because we now walk by grace. There is grace available to face the future. And it means that we now can face any challenge in the future, aware we are not doing it alone. The Bible has told us the new Adam brought us grace and life. And grace means enjoying things we cannot deserve, because we are sinners, we have failed. But now, we don't get them because we have righteousness, but because we now have the righteousness of Christ, who died on the cross. So he's now given us hope. We have grace for the future. So our past is taken care of. Our future is taken care of. There's now no problem to cause us to have sleepless night. And we can enjoy our life in Christ, is what I think we are learning. So may the Lord help us to see this important comparison between the benefits of the new Adam and the consequences of having been born as part of the old Adamic race. May we truly live to enjoy what Christ so painfully purchased for us, and so we can enjoy what he paid for. by enjoying walking with him.